Everyone thinks the thing that kills you in a drought is thirst. It isn't. Thirst is fast, and a drought is slow, and it is the slowness that is the real weapon. A drought that lasts years doesn't come for you in a single terrible day you can brace against. It takes everything by inches: the water, then the plants, then the fat on your body, then the will to keep going. It isn't a disaster. It is a siege, and your ancestors faced this siege again and again across thousands of years with no wells, no stored water, no way to make rainfall. So how do you survive a war of attrition against the sky itself? Stay with me, because you're about to live one of these droughts the way they did, from the first dry season to the last, and by the end, you'll understand why you're alive right now. Let's start by feeling how a drought actually kills, because it is nothing like you imagine. When we picture a disaster, we picture something sudden: a flood, a fire, a storm that hits and passes. You brace, you endure the worst day, and then it is over and you rebuild. A drought is the opposite of that, and that is exactly what makes it so deadly. There is no worst day. There is no single moment to survive. There is only a slow, grinding sameness, a sky that gives nothing day after day after day, for so long that you stop remembering what rain even felt like. The danger isn't the intensity, it is the length. A drought doesn't try to kill you in one blow, it just outlasts you. It waits for you to run out of water, of food, of strength, of hope. So the first thing your ancestors were fighting wasn't the heat or even the thirst, it was time. And the whole art of surviving a drought came down to one brutal question: how do you make what little you have last longer than the drought does? Let me put you inside it so you can feel the weight of it. Picture waking on a morning deep into the second year. You open your eyes to the same sky you've seen for longer than you can stand to count. Hard, pale blue, not a single cloud, the sun already climbing to punish the land. Your mouth is dry before you've moved. You reach for water and take the smallest sip you can bear, because you have to, and you feel your body beg for more, and you refuse it. The ground outside is cracked into a mosaic of dust. The children don't run anymore. They sit in the shade and save their strength without being told to. There is no drama in it, no single crisis to fight, just another day exactly like the last, and the quiet, grinding knowledge that tomorrow will be the same, and the day after that, and that somewhere out there the drought is simply waiting for you to run out first. That is the true face of it. Not a monster at the door. A slow tightening you wake up inside of every single day with no way to know when or if it ends. It begins with water, obviously, but not the way you'd think, because by the time a real drought has set in, the obvious water is already gone. The river you knew your whole life is a road of cracked mud. The lake has pulled back into a stinking green puddle, then into nothing. The rain simply stopped. So if the water you can see is gone, survival depends entirely on finding the water you can't see. And this is where the ancient humans reveal themselves to be something far more impressive than we ever picture. Because water doesn't vanish in a drought. It hides. And your ancestors knew exactly where to look. They knew that even when a river runs dry on the surface, water can still be trapped beneath it, down in the sand and gravel of the riverbed, out of sight. So they dug, in the lowest bends, the shaded curves, the places a lifetime of knowledge told them the water sank last. They dug down into the dry bed until the sand turned dark and damp, and if they were lucky, a little water seeped into a pool at the bottom. It was slow, it was muddy, it was nothing like drinking from a stream, but it was life, pulled up out of ground that looked completely dead. Picture the patience it took. You kneel in the cracked bed of the river that once fed your whole people, and you dig with your hands and a digging stick into sand that is bone dry at the surface. You go down past where any hope should be, and then, a shade darker, the sand cools against your fingers. You keep going, and the damp spreads, and at the very bottom of the hole, water begins to weep in through the grains, slow as honey, cloudy, and brown. You wait, you let it gather, a finger's depth, then two, scooping it out carefully so as not to stir the mud, and it is the most precious thing in the world. A whole family might spend hours at a single hole for a few mouthfuls each, but those few mouthfuls are the difference between today and the end. A person walking past would have seen only cracked earth. Your ancestors saw a hidden reservoir, and they knew how to reach it, and that was only one trick. They knew the land held water in 100 secret places if you understood it well enough, a certain kind of rock hollow that held rainwater in shadow long after everything else dried, the base of a cliff where a hidden seep still ran. They collected the dew that formed in the cool of dawn before the sun stole it back. They knew which plants stored water inside them, thick roots, and stems you could dig up and squeeze or chew for the moisture locked within. None of this was random. All of it was knowledge, precise and hard-won, about exactly where a dying landscape still kept its last drops of life. In a drought, water was a puzzle, and your ancestors had spent generations learning to solve it. And if this is already changing how you see these people, if you're realizing that surviving a drought wasn't about toughness, but about knowing asterisk, then do me one favor, tap that subscribe button right now. This channel is for people who want the real story of where we came from, not the cartoon version. The people who understand that our ancestors survived with their minds long before they survived with their muscles. You belong here. Now stay with me. Because finding hidden water only buys you time. It doesn't win the war. Because a few damp holes dug in a riverbed cannot support a whole group forever. And this is where the drought tightens its grip and forces a second, harder kind of survival. One that happens inside your own body. Rationing when water is scarce beyond imagining. Every single mouthful becomes a decision. You cannot drink when you're thirsty. You drink when you must, the smallest amount that keeps you moving, and you make the rest last. And here your ancestors were fighting their own bodies, because a thirsty body screams at you, demands water, punishes you for holding back. They had to override that scream with discipline, the hard-learned patience of people who knew that the person who drinks all their water today dies tomorrow. They learned to move in the cool of early morning and evening, and to rest in whatever shade they could find through the killing heat of midday. Because a body that works in the full sun sweats away water it cannot spare. They covered themselves against the heat. They slowed everything down. Every choice was shaped by one goal: lose less water. Survival became a constant, exhausting act of accounting, measuring out life one careful swallow at a time. And their bodies were quietly fighting for them too, in ways they'd never have understood. A human body is stubborn about water. It will pull moisture back from everywhere it can, slow its losses, wring every drop of use out of what you give it, hold on far longer than seems possible. But there is a floor, and past it the mind itself starts to go. Deep thirst makes you slow, then confused, then careless. And careless is deadly when survival depends on hard, precise decisions made every hour. So the discipline wasn't only about the water in the skin. It was about staying clear, headed enough to keep making the right calls while your own body was breaking down. The people who survived were the ones who could hold that line, who could stay disciplined, stay calm, stay thinking, even as the drought worked to make them foolish. It was a war fought not just against the sky, but against your own failing body's pull toward panic and mistake. But even perfect rationing runs into a wall, because a drought doesn't only take your water. It comes for your food too, and it takes it in a cruel, cascading collapse that your ancestors had to watch happen in slow motion. It starts with the plants. No rain means no growth. The grasses brown and die. The fruit doesn't come. The roots and seeds and greens that made up so much of what our ancestors ate simply stop existing. And when the plants die, the animals that eat the plants begin to die too, or they leave, walking for days toward some rumor of water, taking the meat with them. The great herds thin out and vanish. Watch how it cascades, because that is the horror of it. Each death pulls the next one down. First you notice the small things going, fewer birds, the insects gone quiet, the little animals you'd normally catch, simply not there. Then the grazers, the deer and the herds, drift away or drop where they stand, ribs showing through their hides. Then the predators that lived off those herds turn desperate and dangerous, or they vanish too. The whole living machine of the land, every part connected to every other part, seizes up and grinds to a halt in a slow chain reaction you are standing right in the middle of. And you understand, watching it, that you are just one more animal in that machine, that the same force killing the grass and the deer is coming, patiently, for you. So now, the hunters come home empty, not because they failed, but because there is nothing left to hunt. The whole web of life that fed your people is unraveling, strand by strand, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. This is the terror underneath a drought. It doesn't just make you thirsty, it quietly dismantles the entire food supply of the world you live in. So what do you eat when the land itself is dying? You do what humans have always done when the easy food is gone. You get less picky, and you get smarter. You dig deeper for the roots that survive underground where the surface is dead. You go after the foods no one bothers with in good times, the tough, the bitter, the small, insects, reptiles. Whatever can be found, you follow the surviving animals to wherever they've gone. Your ancestors had, stored in their memory, a vast catalog of emergency foods, the famine foods, the last resort foods, the things you only eat when you have to. But that can keep a person alive when everything better is gone. Knowing that catalog was the difference between a group that starved and a group that scraped through. Once again, it wasn't strength that saved them, it was the depth of what they knew. But there comes a point in a long drought when no amount of digging, rationing, or scavenging is enough, when the hidden water finally gives out and the last famine foods are gone. And this is the moment that separated the humans who lived from the humans who didn't. Because when the land you're standing on can no longer keep you alive, you have only one option left. You leave. You abandon everything you know, the valley your people have lived in for generations, the places tied to all your memories. You turn your back on the only home you've ever had, and you walk into the unknown, toward somewhere you hope still has water, carrying your children and you're old and you're dying, across a dead landscape with no guarantee that the place you're heading even exists anymore. This is the most dangerous decision a group can make. Leave too early, and you abandon a home that might have recovered. Leave too late, and you're too weak to make the journey, and you die strung out across the desert. And there is no sign telling you which it is, and the walk itself is its own kind of dying. Picture it, a line of people, thin now, moving across a landscape with no green in it anywhere, cracked flats, bare hills, the bones of animals that tried this same crossing and didn't make it. The sun is merciless. You carry the water you have, and you watch it shrink with every hour, and you do the terrible math in your head, how far to the next place we might find more, and will what we're carrying last that long? The old and the young are the first to falter. A child who can't walk has to be carried by someone who can barely walk themselves. Simone falls behind, and the whole group faces the choice. No one wants to speak aloud. Every step burns water you can't replace. Every night you stop, exhausted, and every morning you rise and do it again, walking toward a place that lives only in one old person's memory, a place that might be exactly as she remembers it, or might itself have dried to dust in the years since she last saw it. There is no certainty anywhere. There is only the walk, and the faith that the map inside the elder's head is true. To do this, to leave the known behind and stake every life on a remembered destination across a killing land, took a courage most of us will never be asked to find. So who decides? Who holds the group together in the moment when staying means death and leaving might mean death too? This is where the whole story comes down to one thing. The thing this channel returns to again and again, because it is the true secret of human survival. It comes down to memory, to the oldest people in the group, because a young hunter, strong and fast, has never seen a drought this bad. He has no idea where to go. But the old woman, the elder, she was a child the last time the world dried up like this, 40 years ago, and she remembers. She remembers that when the great river died, her own grandmother led them on a long, terrible walk to a distant place, a spring in the hills, a valley on the far side of the dry lands that still held water when everywhere else had failed. She remembers the way. She remembers a place that matters exactly once in a lifetime, that no young person even knows exists. And in the moment when the group is about to give up, she stands, and she points, and she leads them to water no one else knew was there. That is not a story. That is the mechanism. That is how a species with soft bodies and no claws walk through disasters that erased mighty civilizations. The knowledge that saves you in a once-in-a-generation catastrophe can only live in someone who survived the last one. In a drought, the elder isn't a burden. The elder is the map. The elder is life itself. And this points to the single greatest weapon our ancestors had against the drought, greater than any digging trick or famine food. It was the fact that they could move. They were not tied to one place. When a region died, they could pick up their entire world, which they carried in their hands and their heads, not in buildings, and walk to somewhere that still lived. This ability to move, to follow the water and the food across vast distances, is one of the deepest reasons our kind survived when so much else did not. And here is the proof, and it will flip everything you assume about strength. Because much later in the human story, we did the opposite. We settled down. We built cities, walls, farms, granaries, everything we think of as power and civilization. And when the great droughts came for those civilizations, something shocking happened. They fell. History is haunted by them. Great cities and whole empires that thrived for centuries and then were simply abandoned to the dust when the rains failed for too long. All that power, all those walls, and a long enough drought brought them to their knees, because a city cannot walk away. It is rooted to the spot, dependent on one water supply, one region, and when that region dies, the city dies with it. But the wandering hunter-gatherers, the primitive ones with no walls and no granaries, they had already been surviving these exact droughts for hundreds of thousands of years, because they could do the one thing a city never can. They could leave. In the war against the drought, the mighty settled empire was fragile, and the humble wanderer was resilient. Mobility and memory beat walls and wealth. Read that again, because it turns our whole idea of progress upside down. But there was one more enemy in a years-long drought, and it was the hardest of all to fight, because it wasn't out in the dying land. It was inside your own head. Think about what years of this does to a person. Every morning, the same hard, cloudless sky. Every day, a little less water, a little less food, a little less strength. No end in sight. No way to know if the rains will ever return, or if this is simply the world now, dying around you forever. That kind of hopelessness is its own killer. A person who gives up stops digging, stops searching, stops rationing, stops caring, and a person who stops doing those things in a drought dies. So the fight to keep hope alive was as real as the fight for water. And how did they fight it? The same way humans have always fought the dark together, and with stories. Around the fire at night, the old ones told of the last great drought, the one that ended, the one everyone thought would never break. They reminded each other, asterisk, we have survived this before. The rains always came back. Hold on. Asterisk, that memory passed down was medicine for a breaking mind. It turned a hopeless, endless nightmare into a thing with a shape, a thing that had an ending, because it hadn't ended before. The group that stayed together, that shared its water and its hope, survived. The group that shattered into every person for themselves. Because a person alone in a years-long drought has almost no chance. But a tight group, moving as one, carrying its weak, guided by its old, refusing to give up. That group had a shot, and more often than we have any right to expect, they made it. So how did ancient humans survive a drought that lasted years? Not with strength, not with luck. They survived because they knew where the hidden water was, and how to reach it. They survived because they could ration their bodies down to almost nothing and endure. They survived because they carried a catalog of famine foods in their memory. They survived because when the land finally died, they could walk away. They survived because they held together and kept each other's hope alive through a siege that had no visible end. The drought had every advantage. It had time and patience and the whole sky on its side. And still, it lost. Because here is the thing that should give you chills. Your ancestors didn't survive one drought. They survived every single one, an unbroken chain of them, stretching back across hundreds of thousands of years. Every person in your line lived through the dry years, found the hidden water, made the terrible walk, held on when the sky gave nothing. Not most of them. Every one of them, if even one had failed. One who couldn't find the water, one who left too late, one who gave up under that endless sky. The whole line stops. You are the proof that not one of them ever did. That is not a small thing. That is the greatest unbroken survival streak in the history of life, and you are the living end of it. So the next time you turn a tap and clean water simply appears, water that has never once failed you, not for a single day of your entire life, stop for half a second and feel what that actually is. Your ancestors faced a sky that could stop giving water for years, and they answered it. Not with technology, with knowledge, with memory, with their legs, and with each other. That resilience is in you. It is the reason you exist. The drought tried to end us for hundreds of thousands of years. It tried, and it never won. But water isn't the only thing the sky can take away. Because the same ancestors who learned to outlast years without rain also faced the opposite of the burning drought, a cold so deep and so long it turned half the world to ice. So how did ancient humans survive? Not a bad winter, but an entire age of them. That is the story we open next.